We get live right now, man. It's going down. Excited for the season. You know, we coming off a playoff win. I mean, you know, we had a couple wins.
Hello, and welcome to episode 178 of Diaries, a Milwaukee Bucks podcast presented by us, the staff of Brew Hoop. My name is Riley Feldman, one of your usual co-hosts, joined this week, short turnaround, by Adam Paris. And he's back, folks. The Prince of the Peasants is back from the Great White North, which is ironically further south than where I'm currently located in the Twin Cities. It's Kyle Carr. Adam, I'm going to clear out real quick. We'll let Kyle, how you doing? How was Toronto? Give the listeners the update they've been yearning for weeks now.
Yeah, so I had leftover vacation that I had to use by the end of March. So I figured, all right, I'm going to use it. Never been to Toronto. May as well go out and enjoy it. I was kind of laughing because when Riley came back last week, it was talk about, you know, the beautiful, you know, secluded Belize. It was like everything. Riley's destination and my destination were complete opposites. So Riley's in this like tropical, nice paradise, and I am right in the middle of a city in winter, and it is not as warm. But no, it's a good time. I did a lot, saw a lot. Went to Niagara Falls, went to a Toronto FC game, saw an absolute banger of a goal for the winner. Saw the Hockey Hall of Fame. Walked all over. Walked 33 miles. So that was a lot of walking, but I came back feeling refreshed. I am laughing because where I think they had Jurassic Park, that is the most overrated thing I ever saw, because it is like it's literally like a tiny little parking lot. So I don't know what they were gassing up Jurassic Park for. And the most ironic part is they have a Jordan Wara banner outside. And if that's, it's like on one of those light poles where you have like the players and it has Jordan Wara. And if that's a scream unserious franchise, I don't know what will. I mean, and the fact that he's one of the players is just like how the mighty have fallen. But otherwise, the city itself, it is beautiful. Going up CN Tower was amazing. So, yeah, Toronto, your basketball franchise is whatever, but your city is great. Great city. Would highly recommend everyone to go visit it.
Very cool. Did anybody recognize your voice from the podcast? Any Raptors fans give you a shout out, some love for your sorries of the past? Or, you know,
no one wanted to fight me, so I'll take that. I'll take that as a win. No one wanted to come up and say, I heard what you said, we got to fight. So that was a win for me.
Good. Not even Jordan Wara, you heard, who I'm sure has listened to the podcast. But
yeah, I was gonna say Jordan Wara might hear this and be like, okay, now we have to fight. Fly, come back to Toronto. Let's do this. I'll be like, you know what? If you're paying for my flight, I will gladly come back up to Toronto. Sure.
Good. Well, we're happy to have you back. Adam, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm like thinking about the missed opportunity to get Kyle a shirt that says like I ran at Brew Hoops Twitter from X year to X year. If anyone would take the bait. I'm good. Had our first beach day of the year today with Haley. Haley and I went to the beach and it was cold. The water was cold. Obviously warmer than up there, but that was fun. And other than that, just kind of keeping on. Watching the Bucks, seeing the Badgers do well has been exciting for the past few days. That was pretty unexpected. So I've enjoyed that rise. Had a Shamrock Shake today, my one Shamrock Shake of the year. And that's kind of my big to-do. Mix a little vodka in there, have a good Sunday.
Does beach day mean literally you just went to, like, physically you were at the beach? Is that like what counts as a beach day?
Yeah.
Technically. Okay.
Went for like an hour and a half, and that was
you're like, I'm getting the F out of here. I went to Charleston once in like February. I was like, oh, you know, it should be pretty nice. No, it's pretty freaking cold there. It's pretty cold.
It's still cold. Yeah, that's the thing. But it's much warmer than it is anywhere north of here. So I will gladly take it and never complain. So except for in the summer, then I don't know how people live here. It's terrible. But beyond that, it's good.
Well, while it's heating up on the beaches of Charleston, South Carolina, it's heating up for the Milwaukee Bucks. That's the transition this week to the results. if you were listening to the previous podcast, it's only been a couple of days. Welcome back. The Bucks played 2 games in the interim, a 114-105 victory against the Philadelphia 76ers at home. And then this afternoon, we're recording on Sunday evening, a 140-129 victory over the Suns. I'm not going to say, what did you learn this week? Because it was a short week. Okay, first off, the other thing people have been waiting on, the update on my toe. And they wondered, I said, when Khris is back, the toe will be healed. I woke up this morning. I didn't look at my phone or nothing. I didn't even see the update that Khris was coming back last night. I wiggled my toe in bed. The pain is mostly gone. So I knew something was coming down the pike, and it proved to be correct. Khris did make his return after a month and a half against the Suns. We'll talk about his performance. I'll go to you, Kyle, first, since you've been away the longest. What did you learn about the Bucks these 2 games the week previous, since you were last on the podcast?
Well, if you had asked me the week previous, I would have said, maybe this team just is not going to be good on the road, and that's okay. And they just find new ways to lose games they should win. And the Lakers game was the one that I was just like, you had that in the bag, and you completely threw it away. But other than that, I feel like Milwaukee has done a good job. They've been primarily passing the big game tests lately. I feel like you had the 2 games against the Clippers. You passed those. I don't care if one of those was with no Kawhi. I don't care. It was still a win against a good Clippers team. Come back from the All-Star break, you beat the Timberwolves. A good Timberwolves team so far, yes. And then it's like you beat the Sixers, now you beat the Suns. And yeah, these aren't, like, it's not as though they're beating Oklahoma City's and Boston's and Denver's. I mean, they have beaten Denver, but it seems as though lately everyone was so worried about this month and the stretch of games and how much harder the schedule is going to get after the All-Star break. And so far, they've mostly been winning those games. They've they should have won the Lakers game as well. And that was another big game that was on ESPN. The Golden State one was probably the one big game that they had that they kind of just fell flat. So it's been encouraging to see, when the spotlight has been on them, they have primarily looked to be the part, and they've done it different ways. Today was through Bobby Portis and Dame Lillard and hitting a bunch of threes. On Thursday, it was withstanding and having good defense on Tyrese Maxey. Tyrese Maxey still did pretty well, but it was like they still did the job of focusing, okay, this is going to be the one guy. He's going to be the one to beat us. Let's shut him down. So I think for me, the biggest thing I noticed just from the last few weeks has just been there are still flaws, but a lot of it is just more, it's not necessarily like a skill thing. It just seems to be the team just self-capitulates at the worst times in moments. Golden State, I feel like they had that game. They got it within like 9 and then just couldn't finish the comeback, but that was because the first and second quarters were just complete train wrecks. For the Lakers, it was like, okay, you had a 6-point lead with like a minute left, and then you just could not seem to stop anyone from making a 3 in the final seconds. So it's just kind of stuff like that. But overall, been pretty impressed with how they've played in mostly like nationally televised games or like the hardest games. And I now have a toddler that is just making faces. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but I think he's agreeing with me.
Yeah. I think maybe what the through line to all the big wins or important wins wins against other good teams is a lot of those other teams are also old as hell. So the Warriors are the one exception where they get the ball moving and they absolutely blitz us off the floor from 3 and then, take advantage of our weak paint defense. But a lot of these other teams, and we're going to get into this into the playoffs as well, is like the indicator is these other teams can't just out athleticism us, like especially the perimeter defense, and the perimeter defense has improved enough where you're not writing that off completely as a point at which the defense can start. So I think that's a good point, Kyle. But I think it also has to do with the relative age and skill sets of the teams we're playing against, which is probably also a good sign for the playoffs because there'll be some teams that could bomb us out from 3, but a lot of them, it's just going to slow down, and hopefully it'll slow down enough that the new and improved average defense can do okay. I think that's a fair thing to kind of extrapolate out from it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things, because with the schedule, it's like when we're talking about like the better teams, it is older teams. I mean, we've seen, New York and Indiana. Those are definitely Cleveland even. It's like, yeah, they are teams that are young and athletic. And Sacramento was another one that we saw. Like, they're more young and athletic, but you would hope that the Bucks just more that mentality, and especially in the case of playing like the Pacers, they haven't played them since Doc has been there. So maybe Doc's defense and like the team's improved defense will actually slow them down. So it is interesting, yeah, like how these bigger games have just been against teams that are just generally as old as Milwaukee, which suits them better because now they're not having to go into a athletic shootout with them.
Well, it'll be interesting then with OKC on the schedule for this next week, and then we get them again at the second to last game of the year. We'll see. I mean, hopefully both of them are still playing at full health, but they're obviously the consummate kind of young team that's an upstart and like to get they can get up and down and all that kind of stuff. So that'll be an interesting test. I feel like the thing that always sticks out to me whenever people talk about the schedule getting harder is it generally ends up being like 4 or 5 games out of maybe a 15 game stretch where it's hard games, right? Like that's the funny thing about the regular season is we have a game against Boston left, which will be hard. OKC, maybe the Pelicans, and then another OKC game, another Boston game, another New York. But that's like 6 out of, I don't know, 15 left or something, right? That's like, it's not too many. And so it's funny during the regular season, you still get these kind of just like regular off nights against bad teams. And so you get these results and it's easy to amplify them. But I mean, Kyle's right. These are like the kind of tests that you're going to have to do night in and night out to get ready for the playoffs. And so it's nice to see them, even with some of those disappointing West Coast losses, see them step up, especially in this Phoenix game.
It's one thing to beat the crap out of the Hornets twice in a row and the Bulls and then the Sixers without Embiid. And I'm not above pretending that those results are anything more than just like W's on the spreadsheet. So it's like, of course, 6 in a row. That's why hashtag belt to ass was so funny, is because it came off the back of like the easiest stretch of the schedule of that second half of the season. So it turns out me and Pep have a lot in common when it comes to just pointing to the scoreboard and not pretending about any or not indulging in any other details past that. And like to Adam's point about the remaining schedule. So I think it's 15. Is it 15 games, 14 games left? Only 6 road games. So even then too, part of the other thing about the second half of the season was it's going to be a lot of road games, which is true. We had 2 road trips there. That's mostly in the past. We have one more Southeast road trip at the end of March into early April. And then another stretch of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at home, and then 2 on the road to finish the season, which are essentially 1, 2, 3 Cancun games. It'll be against playoff teams, but it will not be against full strength playoff teams for the most part, or we might not care about the seeding. So good on the Bucks for winning against tougher opponents. A couple more, especially this week against the Celtics and the Thunder, a couple of tougher opponents as well, but moving the right direction at least. Adam, what did you learn about the Bucks since we last spoke a couple days ago?
Yeah, so I mean, I put on here, I think I owe Bobby an apology. It is not because he came out today, apparently post-game, and said, recognized his haters for all wanting him traded.
He's looking at 3. He's looking at 3 of them on this podcast,
of which I count myself a proud member. But I mean, here's the thing about Bobby, right? This is so funny. I was just looking up because I wanted to look up his stats. Clean the Glass has him at -8 this year for a point differential, on-off differential, which is just bad. But you know, sometimes the way I have to go into this postseason is there's going to be matchups like the Suns where you just need him to go off. And given the neutered state of our bench, like I was pretty close to just blindfolding my eyes when I had to see Patrick Beverley try his 3rd runner today that clanked off as he tried to score against the Suns. That was just so brutal to watch. So I'm trying to give myself over a little bit more to the Bobby Portis experience, as much as it pains me at times. And I know this is going to sound crazy, and I need one or both of you to just talk me out of it. But did it look like he was shooting a little faster today against the Suns after maybe working on that these past few seasons? I don't know.
That lethal shooter workout finally came good a year later.
No, Kyle. lethal shooter is still not sealing the pearly gates. I think it's just been so long.
I didn't say it was sealing the pearly gates. I'm just saying it finally came good, and it only took like a year and a half.
I was going to say that I think he's been so far apart from Lethal Shooter that finally all the work that they did is worn off and we're back to like good old Bobby of a couple of years ago. But yes, it did feel like it was happening a little bit quicker and he was a little bit more decisive about it because he said, I'm going to get mine in like more than he usually says. So I think that helped out too. He's like, I'm just going to shoot everything.
He was like, oh, Giannis isn't playing. All right, someone else has to take these shots.
Yeah, and he was more than happy to. Like, I think he has a lot of value as a regular season player. We'll see what happens in the playoffs. I mean, clearly we saw there's matchups where I just think he's going to, even if we need his scoring, I think he's just too big of a negative and not as malleable defensively for it to be able to work. I liked that it seemed like Doc was doing some switch everything stuff against the Suns today with a Bobby lineup that I think could be even more lethal with Giannis in there, as well as you actually have a rim protector. So, you know, he's going to get minutes in the playoffs, probably against most of these teams. Like, even if Doc were to do the crazy Bud thing in Game 7, he's like, I can only play 6 people. I don't know. I mean, maybe, I don't know if Bobby would be included in that or not. But I just think I did think today at the Suns game, I was like, wow, this is the fastest I feel like I've seen him shoot from 3 in a long time. It was really nice to see that. I think he could still get destroyed in like a Boston matchup, but I want to just try and give him a little kudos for once because I feel like I'm always ragging on him.
Exactly right to give Bobby his kudos. And Bobby is it's okay for him to call out the haters, the doubters, the haters, which I think it pained all of us to. I mean, okay, we don't have to call ourselves Bobby haters. Let's call ourselves Bobby realists. That's the way I'm going to. That's what I'm going to call it.
I had been saying like it's going to need to be like a good value trade to make the move. Like it was not the same as like Pat Connaughton or Jay Crowder. It's like please just.
Yeah, Pat looked like he no longer knew how to play basketball. That was a different situation entirely.
You keep that out of your mouth on the day Pat Connaughton blocked Kevin Durant.
I'm just saying like. I was not on this trade Bobby thing like a lot of other people were. I was on it.
I was.
But it was more like, again, it's not like it was Pat Connaughton or Jay Crowder. It was like, I will literally drive them to the airport.
See, but this is the thing about Bobby. And Bobby, I mean, you know, in his heart of heart, I'm sure he knows this is the case. Like, if he makes shots, you can live with it. If he doesn't, he's literally killing you. He's like taking 13 to 14 shots and making 2 of them. It's just... And it's not even shots within the flow of the wider offense. It's like the most ball stopper shots ever. So, I mean, just come on. Like 2 games, he went 4-6 against the Sixers. Like, okay, nothing crazy, but effective.
That's
in his
solid.
21 minutes. Solid. Yeah, solid. And then, yeah, he goes supernova in the first quarter. And then he doesn't score at all in the third quarter, which is fine. But he doesn't score. And then he gets back to it in the fourth quarter. But, like, yes, if one of like the math of if bench guy scores 30 points, he is good. That math checks out. I agree, Bobby. I would say that, but we still have to realize, like, come to Jesus with the fact that, as I was saying on the last podcast, you're not a 6-man who is a guard. And so we can hide you on defense. You're a 6-man who is also a big man. And that's not your fault, but like your deficiencies defensively, which were, you know, not just him, but a lot of guys were on display, given the lopsided 58-30 in favor of the Suns points in the paint differential between the 2 teams today. You know, that's just why it was tough with Bobby, because it's like, okay, well, and he was going through it too. Like all the numbers were saying he's not shooting as well. He's shooting as much or more than he ever has, but the percentages aren't great, and he's just never been a good defender. So I'm happy he stayed. I'm happy he seems to be coming around, and I'm happy that Pat Bev seems to be unlocking him, because we needed goons on the team. And Bobby, credit to him, was one of the only guys who really stood up in the midst of it. It was like, what the F? So shout out to you, Bobby, and sorry there were a bunch of haters. Anybody else have Bobby takes?
This is the Bobby that people like. This is why we fall in love with Bobby, though. Like games like today, it's like that's why we love Bobby, because he provides the spark that is so desperately needed, and he still was doing it off the bench. Like I thought he would have maybe gotten into the starting lineup with Giannis out, and I didn't know if they're going to just throw Khris in the starting lineup. They did, so I was like, all right, this is going to be a Dame and Bobby show. I'm all for it.
All right. Speaking of Bobby, let's talk about another backup big. There needs to be no analysis, because this week he played 4 minutes and 57 seconds of game time. Is it something or is it nothing that in a game without Giannis, Danilo Gallinari doesn't even make it off the bench today against the Suns? Have we survived the Danilo
I hope
era?
so, because this era stinks. It's garbage. It's bad.
I would say, thankfully, with Khris back, I was able to get kind of my quotient, hit my whatever quotient of cool passes to time watching Bucks basketball without Danilo Gallinari being on the court, and he was one of the few people contributing to that. So, I think it's something. I think Doc was just being really, really Doc with the whole Danilo Gallinari experience. I don't know how you find room for him in a rotation anymore, even with Giannis out, right? Like, that would be I don't want to say criminal, but it would be just really wrong if Gallo's getting regular minutes in the playoffs. Like, we can't have that, right?
Eastern Conference Finals, the game 3, Danilo Gallinari gets like his 10 minutes just because we need to throw something out there. It is coming. So I'm not saying it's over, because it's not over. There's no way it's over. He's coming around again.
I mean, okay, so it would be one thing if he came in and was like the actual Gallo that I remember in the Hawks series where he was just roasting us. But
yeah. Where he single-handedly said, I'm going to take my team to the finals.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's 7 of 22 so far with the Bucks. That's not great. I mean, 1 of 11 from 3. That's really rough. So I'm comfortable saying I think it is something that he's out of the rotation now. I think he was just a big body, right? Yeah. I mean, there's no way Doc will do that to us.
We pray. Okay, you brought up Khris Middleton, and let's just jump into him too real quick. The return. It's not my point. My point is more important and more consequential, so we're going to hold off on that. Khris Middleton makes his return, like I said, month and a half off. Looks great. I'm not sure if there's any other way to really characterize it. He plays 25 minutes, so minutes restriction off. I mean, he didn't play like 30 plus, but still 25 after a really long break where they really held him out. Wanted to make sure he was right. 22 points, 7 assists, 3 rebounds. Trying to remember if he had any great defensive plays. I'm sure he might have had a couple of stands. He probably was fine. Thoughts? Happy? To me, what I would say is he's the connector guy. I look forward to getting a lot of reps with him, Giannis, and Dame down the stretch here. So the games do matter in as much as just getting those guys reps together. But he's the connective tissue on the bench units. He's the guy who can take shots out of the blue when Dame is on the bench. Some of the passes he were making is like, okay, yeah, this is. I know Gallo was here to do that, but turns out Gallo can't do that anymore. So Khris is doing it, which is good. So happy to have Khris back. Any other Khris thoughts from today's game?
No, I think it's good to have him back. It's clear that they're waiting until he was 100% instead of just putting him out. Like they said, if it was the playoffs, maybe he plays. I don't know to what extent. It seems like after that quote, he was still out like another month. So a little concerning, but at the same time, I think it was just one of those where it's good to have him back. He's going to be someone that will be able to keep the offense moving, kind of like what you guys would say. But I think that's going to be like the biggest benefit is he'll be able to kind of have things flowing. And if things get in a rut, instead of, having Bobby being the one that to take that shot, then you have Khris, and you feel a little bit better with Khris doing it. So I think it's just going to be interesting how defensively, because we haven't really seen Khris in Doc's scheme on the defensive side, so we haven't seen much of it. So that's what I'm kind of curious to see how that turns out.
Yeah, I thought, I think he looked I thought he was looking more athletic as the year went on before this injury, and we'll see what he looks like after that. I thought at least defensively he was moving his feet better than early in the season. I thought it looked really bad, and I thought it improved at least a little bit to where he seemed passable. He's just such for me, an enjoyable offensive player to watch, because he has some of that, just does his own thing. I want to isolate. I want to make a crazy shot right now. But he can also run a pick and roll with almost anyone and launch some sort of small bounce pass in a small area. And it doesn't always work out well, right? Like sometimes he just dribbles it off his feet. Sometimes he just bounces it off someone else's feet. So it's not always perfect. But I'm going to be really interested to see how the late game offense looks with those 3 under Doc, with Dame and Khris and Giannis, and seeing what that does, and also just it'll be nice to have his chemistry back with Giannis as a pick and roll partner. I think Dame and Brooke, clearly Dame and Brooke are the best pick and roll duo. I would say, I mean, Brooke is Dame's best pick and roll partner right now, I think, in my opinion, in terms of chemistry. And then Giannis kind of has Khris, and you want to find ways to get both of those things flowing, because I also think they need to find a few more ways to get Brooke shots down low than they have this whole season, and find ways to weaponize him a little bit more beyond the 3-point thing. And I think Khris can help unlock that. But it was just nice to see him healthy and back after the last month and a half or whatever of discourse about his injury. So it was good to see him out there and look nimble.
Agreed. We've talked during his entire absence that the bench has no punch whatsoever. One way to solve that is literally have another starter who can average, like, at this point, I mean, it's like 15 points a game, could be a little bit higher, but I think that's the spacing thing. Like, of course, Khris Middleton, even on pretty low for him 3-point attempt rate, which I think is like 38% this season. His most recent low compared to that would have been 34%, like in the 2020-2021 season. He's only taken 4.5 threes a game. It's actually very funny. We had the Khris Middleton wars where it's like he just needs to keep pumping up. We need to be getting like 8, 9, 10, and it's just been decreasing year on year on year. So interesting that that's happening, but clearly just like a better threat from the perimeter than a Jay Crowder. And again, another thing too, excuse me, related to Jay Crowder, not having him in the starting lineup, it's addition by subtraction. Shout out to Jay. I'm sure you still have a role to play with this team. Redemption game against the Suns today, so shout out to Jay.
Yeah, he looked good, Kyle.
Yeah.
He did. I'm very happy. You know, we've got some nice apartments over in Marseille. Okay, like we put him in Marseille. Like, it's pretty good for him.
It was very funny that literally the podcast before this was like, I don't remember last time I remember that, like, thought of Jay doing something good, and that he has two like okay game and then a really good game against the Suns. So Adam's making a face. What are you making a face for, Adam?
Honestly, I didn't realize till now that Kevin Durant had 11 points today. I didn't realize he had such a minor game, playing 41 minutes. That is rough. Oof. Weird.
Yeah. The Suns are cooked. They're unfortunately for the Suns, they're starting Grayson Allen, who did score 25 points, but also blew the game for them late, which we're very used to. So shout out to you, Grayson. Yeah, Khris looks great. I'd be very curious when Giannis is back, because the other thing too that Kyle said, so he's not used to the defense, which is fine. I believe that he'll get there, no problem at all, because he's functioned in good defenses in the past. The other thing too is he hasn't existed in the offense when we've been like making the Giannis Dame pick and roll 2-man game, like running those sets as a very specific component of the offense, which explains why everybody was like, well, thank God Khris is really fitting in, because in a coaching situation prior to Doc and even Prunty coming in where there was no coaching, Khris would thrive in that sort of situation as the third banana. So curious how he's going to look. I believe in it. I have faith that it'll work out just fine. But that's another thing too. So as many reps as he can get, the better. And it was interesting too in the third quarter, the Bucks ended up blowing their 20 plus point lead, but they did try to feed Khris a lot. It was like, all right, like Khris, he brings the ball up every single time, and he's going to either shoot or he's going to make an action and pass out of it. So Khris is back. Khris is looking good. You know who else is back? You know who else is looking good? The thing I learned this week, and by this week I mean these last two games, is that a guy who I thought was going to be out of the league immediately, I was befuddled that he was brought back, that he was not just brought back, but signed to a multi-year NBA contract. AJ Green has vindicated Kyle Carr's vision. Kyle is believed from the very maybe I don't know if it was the very beginning, but pretty close to the beginning, more than anybody else.
Definitely earlier than most people. Yeah, I would say at one point mid last year when we were doing the 8-man rotation, I think I gave him an honorary shout.
Yeah, Kyle was the VC. He was the venture capitalist that jumped in. He bought a lot of stake in AJ Green Corp, and he's going to be rolling in the dough here soon. I'm not going to say that AJ Green is going to crack the hypothetical 8-man rotation, which we are not doing this week, but we will do in the coming weeks as we get close to the playoffs. But I do think he has a role to play next year and maybe into the playoffs next year, because this dude can defend his ass off in a way that literally, if you would Russian rouletted me and say, okay, you have to guess what, I don't even know what the example would be, but like, you have to guess what would be the skill that AJ would really flash this year. Be like, of course, it has to be shooting, or maybe like he can pass a little or something. To stand dudes up, and not even just dudes, like great players on top of it. So it starts against the Sixers. Tyrese Maxey is roasting us alive. And a lot of it, to be fair, really tough shots, which hats off to the guy. He has a handful to take care of. AJ Green comes into the fourth quarter and he shuts Tyrese Maxey down. Maxey scores 2 points, and AJ Green is the guy who's assigned with guarding him. So outstanding. And then tonight, or excuse me, this afternoon against the Suns, he's asked to guard Devin Booker. He's asked to guard Bradley Beal, and not just like, kind of get a switch or whatever, kind of crash the paint or wherever. He's getting ISO'd against some of like the best individual one-on-one scorers in the league and holding his own. I'm like, I can't believe what's happening. And he can shoot from three, and like he has no hesitation about shooting from three. He takes instructions from like the other floor generals really well. He runs the floor well. Like, again, he's not old enough to crack Doc's rotation. If he was like 32, he'd be in there, but that's what Pat's here for. So I want to give a shout out to AJ Green, who of the three young guys somehow has seemed to be the one that has the most immediately translatable skill. So with all that out of the way, I'll let Kyle take his victory lap.
Look, they called me a madman. That's all I got right now. Okay.
Okay, you're looking at them again. You're looking at them on the podcast right now.
But it was one of those where, and the thing I think has been the most shocking has been the defense, because the shooting has been, what he was drafted for, that was going to be his skill. He was going to be the sharp shooting guy, come off the bench, hit some threes. He's done that lately. I mean, he hit one. He only took one today in 15 minutes. That was his only field goal. No, sorry, that was his only 3 attempt. Was 3 of 7 against Philly, 1 of 4 against Sacramento. Didn't make any against Golden State, and 2 of 4 against the Clippers. So the shooting the ball is still there. But yeah, I think defensively, and I think a lot of it is he does have a pretty decent size to him. Actually, like when you actually look at him, even though it says 6'4", he seems to be more
6'8".
stout.
He might be like 6'8", is what you mean. Oh no.
He plays bigger than he actually is, and I think that's been the biggest thing. And defensively, I've been shocked at that. Like, even I would not have predicted what we have seen from him on defense. But I think a lot of it is just because you mentioned a couple weeks ago, like, he knows how to set a screen. I think he just knows how to fight through screens. He's using that physicality, and this is something that I feel like that's where MarJon has lacked, is being able to use his body and use his physicality to benefit him. And that's something that we thought Andre Jackson Jr. could do. Unfortunately, it gets him in foul trouble. But with AJ Green, I'm very happy about it. I am not joking when I say this could be the guy that is the starting 2 guard next year.
They said he was a madman.
Because
continue to say he was a madman.
Unless Milwaukee decides to pay Malik Beasley a lot of money, I don't know what your other option is for your 2 guard. Like, we don't know if Pat Connaughton's still going to be here. I'm just saying, AJ Green, starting 2 guard, does not sound as ridiculous next year. And I'm going to say it happens. Unless there's another ridiculous trade or like a home run free agent deal like a Malik Beasley, that doesn't make sense until it happens.
It's a major credit to Kyle. I mean, I feel like I remember a summer league game where AJ Green got like pressed and he had to call a timeout like it was in 5th grade for me. And now he's this. He's really it's just a credit to him too. I mean, he's gotten, like you both said, he's done so much work to get good defensively. Like Kyle said, he fights around screens. He's got good broad shoulders. I mean, he like stood up Devin Booker a couple times today, and Book might have still made a shot, but he looks really good. I can't really fight with Kyle that much on he could be the 5th starter next year. Frankly, I don't have that many more legs to stand on for Pat Connaughton Island. I will continue to do so for the Pat over AJ Green argument, but if he's in the playoffs, I expect him to probably make some shots. and be okay defensively. And like, frankly, given who we're running with at our backups, like that's pretty good. And I would be content with that.
Yeah, it's interesting with guys like AJ Green or anybody who doesn't get a lot of run. I mean, I was just ragging on Gallo a minute ago because he's new and he doesn't play that many minutes or whatever. Any guy who kind of gets break glass in case of emergency onto the court, especially when they're not part of the regular rotation, it feels like there's already kind of baggage against them. It's like, oh, well, he hasn't played at all. There must be a reason for that. You know, his mistakes get magnified. The successes also sort of get magnified, but you kind of brush them off like, oh, it's just kind of stupid and silly. So it's like, if for whatever reason, AJ Green was playing a lot of like regular minutes throughout the year, I don't know what kind of point I'm trying to make, but like, it doesn't sound that preposterous because it just sounds preposterous, not because he only gotten minutes like the past couple of weeks. You know, if he had been like in that Ajax spot where he was getting like, 10 to 15 minutes a game regularly throughout the first half of the season, there's still part of me that's like pining, like, I wonder if Andre Jackson Jr. still has something in the tank, just because I had seen him play a decent amount of minutes earlier in the season. So, maybe AJ Green having an actual claim on the rotation is not that crazy. It's just hard to imagine him really cracking a playoff rotation now just because of all the established guys in front of him. But credit to Kyle, who is a certified ball knower, known and now can put AJ Green up on the mantle and say, I always believed. I will ask, I got one more AJ Green question. Would you define him as a hooper or just as a basketball player?
He's got shades of hooper in him. I think we're gonna go with that.
Okay, good. Adam, do you feel strongly hooper basketball player?
I've kind of forgotten what the difference is, but
I don't know what the difference is. I'm just rolling with it.
I think it's just vibe. I think it's just literally just vibe, just feel.
Then whatever Kyle said, I defer to him on all things scouting from now on. Wonderful.
Okay, so shout out to you, AJ Green. We'll do the 8-man rotation maybe next week, maybe in 2 weeks. Prove that you lay a claim. Kyle probably already has you in there in permanent marker, but see if you can break into Adam and I's 8-man rotation. That's your challenge the next couple weeks. Okay. Any other Bucks takes on the week? The 2 games that were. Seeing head shaking.
Good week.
Okay.
Good 2 games. Good 2 games.
Good 2 games. Good two get right games at home. Now we move on. We don't have a Buck the host. I was gonna say let's do a Celtics preview. We don't have to get that crazy. I just got one question for you guys, okay? And this is a Riley question because it's extremely derivative and just boils everything down to something very simplistic. But assuming full health for both teams, does a victory for the Bucks against the Celtics on national TV on Wednesday, does that vindicate the Doc Rivers project?
I'm still no.
But does it help?
It doesn't hurt. It definitely warms. I go from a block of ice. It starts thawing. It's still a bit frozen, but at least it's not like a block.
Okay. I don't really have any other Celtics takes. I wish I could provide more analysis. Adam, if you can, please go.
Can I have? Well, I don't have something Celtics related. Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
That also might be very simple, and you both might have a very simple answer. But
okay.
So we had no Giannis today. Giannis was out, kind of a late scratch, which was kind of interesting. Apparently, he's been on the injury list the last couple games. This is questionable, all that kind of stuff. So he didn't play against the Suns. Against the Clippers, what was that? 2 weeks ago, Giannis doesn't play. Both of those games, I would say Dame plays very well. Anything? Is that nothing? Like, if we talk that through, like, why is there any particular reason we think that is beyond just like he knows he can have the ball? Like, he feels like he's kind of been in this role for a while where he knows what it's like, where he's the main engine the whole game. I don't know. I've just kind of been trying to turn that over in my head and think about it a little bit.
I would say, the Clippers game was interesting because it's like you didn't have Giannis or Khris. So it did kind of feel like, okay, it's going to be jump on Dame's back and just roll with him. And I think the Suns game was also another indicator of that. I don't know why. Like, I can't think of the why. Maybe because it's less maybe there's less like trying to make it work, and it's a little bit easier, and he could just go more in a rhythm, and potentially just more plays can go through him. That's the only thing I can think of. It is interesting though, but I can't really pinpoint like a why other than maybe it's just a little bit easier to have more of the offense flow through him, which is what would suit his skill set better.
I think all that's true. I wouldn't read that much into it. What I think the only indication is everything we've heard in the media about Dame really wants this to be Giannis's team, or does not want to be seen as trying to overtake Giannis or whatever. I think there's much more than just a kernel of truth to that. And the issue we're having is Giannis, who habitually labels himself like the worst player in the league. He's god awful, and if he was the GM, he'd get rid of himself, which is like, that's kind of his bit. So, and that's how he motivates himself. That's fine. But Giannis, of course, he's very genuine when he tells Dame, like, "Hey, bro, this is your team now." And which is funny because Dame literally just showed up out of the blue, and Giannis, essentially, he's the reason the franchise exists. So I think there's been a mismatch all season long between Dame's realism saying, "This is not my team. I came from a spot where I was the Giannis of the team. Like, if the roles were reversed, it would be like, this is just how I would go about it." And Giannis quite genuinely being like, "Oh, Dame will like do a lot of cool stuff and he can run the offense or whatever." But also Giannis does not want to give up full control at the same time. So that's just kind of that mismatch. I think now that Doc is here, I think the offense has a little more coherence, even if it has taken a bit of a hit in the overall output. I think there's more structure. There's more confidence in Dame into what he can do. The sets being run around him. And even in this game, first half, he has 12, this game against the Suns, I should say, 12 first half assists. He's just out there creating for other guys. He had a couple of baskets, but nothing crazy. And then third quarter, fourth quarter, that's when he takes over. And then he turns on what we've seen throughout the year, like really crazy deep shots, like breaking down opposing defenses, manufacturing points out of nothing, getting to the free throw line. Like he just seemed more enabled. And we've kind of seen that throughout the season. So I'm not sure if I would say there's anything to it, just probably more so he's more comfortable operating by himself out there than he would have been a couple of months ago. But I do think they also feel more comfortable playing together. So I don't see it as like a red flag. Not that you're implying it's a red flag, Adam, but that would be my take on it.
Okay. I was just curious. That stood out to me. I tend to agree with both of your takes. I didn't, like you said, I wasn't trying to make it into anything major. And obviously Giannis has been awesome, but I just thought it was kind of interesting to see Dame play that well. And I'm curious how Doc is going to handle now the staggering of Khris, Dame, and Giannis moving forward too, and seeing what that looks like in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the bigger thing, is just like, how does those rotation, who gets staggered when? Because in the past with Budenholzer, it was like we would see a lot of Giannis and Drew, but we never saw that much Giannis and Khris. And when it got to the postseason, I felt like that was always interesting. Even like at the beginning of Budenholzer, it felt like Khris and Giannis was never played at the same time, other than like the starting quarters. Like once they started getting to like putting bench guys in, it was never like a Khris and Giannis. It was like one or the other. So I do wonder how much that changes with Dame, and I think it's like, do we see more of Khris and Giannis because they have just better chemistry that will allow Dame and Brook, depending on how much time Dame and Brook gets, does that potentially alter what Dame does? So I will be curious to see how that staggering goes, Adam. That's a good point.
Yeah, the staggering there, and like the reason why you had to have kept Khris out there in the past was who else was going to handle the ball. Now we have Dame, and so you don't necessarily need to have Khris out there. I think Khris is still properly utilized if you want to sit Dame as like the pseudo backup point guard. Pat Bev is not necessarily that guy, which is totally fine. That's why you have Khris here. So maybe it's like, do Giannis and Dame sit a lot? So that, yeah, I have no idea how Doc is going to run that. I'm trying to think back to the short period where Doc was here and all three of them were available, but things have changed so much offensively since then. And I'm glad to see that Adam is not trying to plant the seeds of this is actually Dame and Chris's team and not Giannis's team. So that's good. I'm glad we did. Again, not implying that that's what Adam's doing. So, okay. Any other questions for the esteemed panel about the Milwaukee Bucks before we get to rapid fire questions? Okay, let's get to it. 4 questions, all really important, all things that people I'm sure have been thinking about for months, years, if not decades now to ask the panel. First one, Grayson Allen makes his return to Pfizer Forum since getting traded to the Suns. I did not get confirmation from our colleague Gabe Stoltz if there was a tribute video. What I wanted to ask, assuming there wasn't one, to you, what are the minimum qualifications a player must hit to be deserving of a tribute video in their first game back against the Bucks?
So one of the factors has to be longevity. How long were they here? Because like if John Henson came back and got like John Henson would get a tribute video because John Henson mattered at one point and he was here long enough.
Okay.
Were they part of the title team? That's going to be if they were part of the team that won the title and they actually played a role in it. They will like Bobby and Pat. If they ever leave and get their first game back, they'll absolutely get a tribute video, 100%. So I think that is another factor. And did the fans like them enough? And that's, I think, the problem with Grayson Allen. I don't think enough people liked him enough for him to get a tribute video. Marjan will make his own tribute video, and he will give that to the Bucs staff. I don't think that's going to count, though.
Wow, that's really good criteria. I don't have much more to add. I guess if it was just, I would say if you weren't part of the title team or you didn't have some sort of special significance, I'd say you have to have been here at least 5 years before you deserve a tribute video.
I was gonna say like because I was thinking back to Doldrum's Bucks, like we really sucked. But like we had dudes who were chuckers for like a couple of seasons ago. So like Brandon Jennings, of course, was not part of any sort of title winning team and was in fact quite detrimental on the court at times, especially with his running mates. But he kind of transcends it because of a meme. So it's like without the meme, does Brandon Jennings, like maybe he did when he was with the Pistons or whatever. I don't even remember, but I think you have to be like if you're not going to be a title winner, you have to have, to me, at least 3 seasons of being like a starter who chucks a lot. That's like the only other thing. Because then you'll have like, you got to give the video people enough stuff to work off of to put it together, right?
I think Brandon Jennings would have gotten it regardless because like everyone remembers like the rookie or the 55. Like that right then and there was going to get him a tribute video to Matt because he brought hope to Milwaukee at a time when there was not a lot of hope.
All right. Well, shout out to you, Grayson. Sorry if you didn't get a tribute video, but I also actively wanted to trade you for like 2 seasons, so I'm not going to take it too hard. Okay. What is the best Mexican beer of the 3? Maybe you guys don't like Mexican beers, but who doesn't? Corona, Modelo, or Pacifico? Or you can name a 4th if you have a favorite 4th out of that's not in the core 3.
I'm a big Modelo person.
Oh. I'm Pacifico or Tecate.
Oh, Tecate.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
I like a Pacifico specifically in a bottle. I like that.
I think the thing with Modelo is that is what is constantly served at like sporting events. So I feel like that's just the one I keep getting. Tecate's good though. Tecate is good. I just feel like I never see it in Wisconsin that much.
I appreciate Modelo's because they have the stupid little fat little bottle, which I find so funny every time I get them. The foil at the top, it's horrible. It's maybe one of the worst design choices any place has ever made. So I'm not, excuse me. I'm not going to go full Modelo, but I will also say Pacifico with the lime because our favorite taco joint in the city serves Pacifico and it's very good with tacos. So, but you know what? You can't go wrong with any of them, right, folks? They're nice, easy drinking beers. Okay. Interesting question. Interesting that Kyle went to this player as a possible future tribute video guy. I was just going to ask, do you think we'll ever see Marjan play real actual rotation minutes again as a Buck this season beyond, or do you think it's over? Is this it?
It's done.
Oh man, that's sad. I think we will. I mean, I don't know. I'm starting to look on the other side of this thing, and it's like it's pretty dark, right? All these guys are really old. Like we need someone to be good, and maybe they just stick with their picks in the next draft. But I'm a little afraid they're going to trade them. God forbid they draft Zach Edey. Please do not do that. If I can ask you of anything, John Horst, please don't draft Zach Edey. But I don't know. I think they could hang on to him. I don't know why another team would even want him. Like, I don't even know what value he would have right now. So I still have, I'm holding out hope that there's still something there.
I think that's totally reasonable because if AJ Green could turn it around, anybody can turn it around.
Yeah, but we knew AJ Green had an NBA skill.
That's true. That's true. Marjan's just, he's like kind of like the right size, but I don't know about the rest that's going on there. Shout out to you, Marjan. Maybe he'll be around next season. The other thing that's going against him as well, he's too young. And also Ajax is here. So why would Doc not just say, okay, I'll play the guy who like quite clearly could impact the game like in a much more tangible way. So we'll see. Okay. Final question related to the Mexican beers. What's your favorite or top protein to include on tacos? So what kind of meat, or you could do a non-meat if you like, but if you're getting a taco from your favorite taco place, what is your protein of choice?
I'm pork. I usually go al pastor. So I like pork.
Chorizo.
Ooh, I like chorizo in the morning. Tacos are okay, but chorizo in the morning for me. I like shrimp, and maybe that's a real basic guy take, but who doesn't love shrimp tacos?
I feel like if I'm in somewhere tropical, then yes, I will get like a seafood one. I'm just still very skeptical. Like, I know it's going to be the best it can be, but it's still Midwest. So I don't know how confident I feel in a shrimp or fish taco.
I've been trained that I know that Midwest shrimp are the best shrimp. That's
fresh out of Lake Michigan. Yeah.
Yeah. They got 10,000 lakes in this stupid state. You telling me there's no shrimp in any of those lakes? Come on. So that's a totally valid concern, Kyle. Okay. That's all I got. So I think Kyle's up next. Love is Blind, the update, part 2. Let's go.
We are back. So last time I was here, I talked about Love is Blind, and Adam and Mitchell were just looking at me with the most confused faces. Adam still has the most confused face possible. But I just have an update because I think when I provided the updates, I think it was like the first 4 or 5 episodes. I went through the whole thing. I got through all the episodes. They got to the altar. We did the reunion. My goodness, it is a complete mess. Every man on there was terrible in some way, shape, or form, except there's only one guy, and his biggest flaw is he just doesn't understand contraception. That's just, he's a guy that we won't completely knock him for that, but he was a good person at least. We got one guy who lied about his location to his fiance, and then goes and decides to date a chick who we don't know where she was on January 6th, and there's a lot of questions on where was she on January 6th. We got a guy that was on the show and had a relationship and got called out on it. That was bad. We had someone that decided when they got to the altar, he wasn't ready for marriage. He was like, yeah, I don't think I'm actually ready to get married, even though the point of the show is to get married after, this time. Another one that just simply was on his phone too much. And I mean, he wasn't that bad of a person, but he's just on his phone too much and just did not seem to have much personality. And then we had another guy who kept acting like he wanted a strong independent woman, and every time there was a strong independent woman, he would falter. All these guys suck. It was a mess. And quite frankly, what I learned from Love is Blind is whoever is responsible for the vetting process definitely got fired after the season, because this was a mess of a season. And that's probably the biggest thing I learned. So Love is Blind, it was ridiculous. The season was a mess. There was only one successful couple out of 5. That's not pretty good. So yeah, it was chaotic. Like I said, if you just want trashy reality show, Love is Blind is right up your alley.
Adam, do you have
I don't know. I mean, that's just, my mouth just kept opening wider as Kyle kept going on. I think the one thing that made me feel most relatable to any of those men was the man who got to the altar after this crazy reality show, not seeing this person till the end, and was like, I don't think I'm quite ready for this. No, duh. That person sounded like the most rational one yet. So that was the only one that seemed The other ones seem kind of crazy, but I'm glad you went through that for us, Kyle, to provide us the update.
I will gladly do it. I don't know when the next season will come out, probably later this year, but when that happens, I will have it ready. And I will actually have a film review next time we're on, because I will actually watch a movie at some point.
A movie that isn't Sonic 2. Yeah, okay, good. We'll be looking for the next movie review. Okay, we'll wrap it up here. Short podcast. We still almost get it to an hour, which is typically us. 3 games this week for the Milwaukee Bucks. Biggest one, of course, being this Wednesday at the Boston Celtics. Again, that one's going to be on national TV. Thursday, the Bucks are back at home to face the Brooklyn Nets, and then they stay at home on Sunday and face the Oklahoma City Thunder. Kyle, what say you for the record this week?
I'll go 1-2. I think lose at Boston. I think they'll beat Brooklyn. I think the Thunder game will be a little bit tough. So I'm going to say 1-2. I don't know why I'm not feeling super optimistic. I think it's just, I feel like playing at Boston is always just weird, because either they just can't hit a shot or Boston just doesn't seem to miss. It always seems to be one of those two things. Oklahoma City, we talked about playing a young athletic team, and that is exactly what Oklahoma City is. And I don't know. Yeah, I'll go 1-2. I think they beat Brooklyn.
I think 2-1. I don't feel good about Boston, but they could pull it out, and I could see them still dropping the back-to-back against the Nets and do something really dumb like that if they somehow beat Boston. And then I think they'll beat the Thunder. But I'm guessing they'll probably lose at Boston and then win the next 2. So 2-1.
I'm going to say 2-1 as well. I believe in Doc Rivers. I believe in the project that he's building. And while you guys don't think it'll vindicate it, I'll be stupid enough to say that if we beat the Celtics, Doc Rivers is vindicated. So I believe they will get the victory. Al Horford can't keep getting away with it. Come on, man. At some point, it's got to be done, right? One of these has got to go our way. So shout out.
Yeah, that's the thing. We've been saying this for like 2-3 years, and yet here we are.
I've been on this podcast making an ass of myself over Al Horford for literally almost half a decade. So I have to be right eventually. I will be right one day. So hopefully Wednesday's that day. Yes, they will lose against the Nets. And then I think the Thunder, the Bucks are going to play get right. They're going to break their habit of losing to the young athletic teams. They're going to find, I don't know how they're going to do it. I literally have no suggestions at all how they're going to do it, but I think they will find a way, probably make 25 out of 43s, and that'll do it for them. So 2-1 this week. I'm hopeful for the Bucks. Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of the podcast. Thank you, Kyle and Adam, for joining me as usual. Folks who are listening, like, subscribe. We're on YouTube. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify, all the areas. If you want Bucks coverage, we got game coverage over at brewhoop.com. We have Monday Morning Media Roundup, which I forgot to give a shout out to last podcast, which is funny because it's my own column. Questions and Antlers, Jim Paschke. It's still up. I don't think Jim has answered the questions yet. You could try to go ahead and get more questions in if you like. That goes up on Tuesdays, Tuesday tracker, excuse me, Wednesday weekly wrap up. We get the results of the tracker. We get the answers on Questions and Antlers. Like I said, game coverage pre, during, and post. Everything over there. Brew Hoops YouTube page. Everything. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you again next week.